Hello everyone, welcome to a product review at Phenomenal. In this video, we're going to review Edelweiss Europe Dynamic Equity Offshore Fund. This fund primarily focuses on the European market and it's an active fund. It charges an expense ratio of 1.52%. It's quite high for even for an active fund, right? And this also comes under the direct version, so the regular version would be much more expensive. So you're getting exposure to the European stock market. So mind that this doesn't include the countries like the US, right? Because it's not in the Europe. So just know that this primarily focuses heavily on the European countries, right? We will look into what countries this fund is invested in, but before that, we will quickly understand whether the fund manager has added value to the investors or not. So this is a European fund, and it's fair to compare it against an European benchmark, right? So we are also automatically suggesting your benchmark. This is very critical in the sense that Phenomenal has over thousands of benchmarks, right? So when you're analyzing funds, you should not be wasting time on thinking about which benchmark to choose, how to choose it, right? So that's why we automatically select a benchmark based on our own methodology, which is again explained here, and also we have heavy research on how we select the benchmarks, right? So we automatically select an European benchmark, which here makes sense because it's an European fund. What we see here is that this fund, since the inception, has brutally underperformed compared to the European index. And if you look at the outperformance year on year, there have been some years where it outperformed the index, but overall, most of the years it underperformed a simple European benchmark. So now that we know that this fund is charging 1.52% and it has underperformed its benchmark, we will now move on to the asset classes and markets. So we need to know what countries this fund is invested in, right? Because it's giving you exposure to the European market. So we need to understand whether it's justifying its name. So you can see here that it gives you exposure to the United Kingdom here, France, Netherlands, all European markets, right? So yeah, it does give you exposure to a lot of European markets. If we move on to the sectoral exposure, you don't see a very high exposure to anything, right? Like not 50% or 60%. So it is quite diversified among a lot of sectors here, with financials and information technology sectors being on the higher end compared to the other sectors. So what is this fund has done till now, right? So the fund has underperformed its benchmark. It has a lot of European countries, right? Gives you exposure to the European market. Is there a way where you can look into this fund, like adding it to a portfolio or not? One thing that you can look into is the diversification aspect of it. Again, mind that this fund has underperformed a simple benchmark, right? But like we all know that as in India, you don't get exposure to a lot of international funds that easily via Indian mutual funds, right? So this has a very modest diversification score of 30. So 30 is again on the lower end, 100 being the best diversifier, right? So mostly anything above 50 or 60, this is where gold or any diversifier like alternative fund comes into the picture, right? So this is still not a diversifier, but it does diversify your Indian exposure to other countries, right? If your portfolio is heavily tilted towards Indian equities, this does add some value in terms of international diversification. And we also saw that the diversification score being low, right? And diversification score is being calculated using the downside beta. It's again quite on the higher end for the ACWI index, right? So what we have seen till now is that it has underperformed its benchmark. it has a heavy exposure to the European countries, like the name says, and you also see a bit of financial exposure and technology exposure from the sectoral allocation. So is that all, right? What else can you do? Like, no, till now for the fees it's charging, it hasn't justified its fees. So what are other alternatives that you can look into? So unfortunately, there aren't many products that are cheap and gives you, Europe exposure, right? There's one product from Invesco which gives you European exposure, but it has underperformed the Edelweiss Europe dynamic equity. So we can also look into the performance of these funds, right? So with similar or better performance, currently there isn't a lot of options that an investor has, right? So here you can see the blue line, right? The Edelweiss European dynamic equity has outperformed this peer, which is charging much lower compared to the Edelweiss equity. But when you move beyond India and look into thousands and thousands of ETFs across the UK market or the US market, you will find simple benchmarks at a fraction of the cost, and that's what we are going to do. What this next analysis tells you is that now I've picked a European stock index from the US market. It trades under the ticker VGK. It has simply outperformed this fund that's charging 1.52%, and the fees for this ETF is just under 0.1%. That's a massive reduction in fees, and you're outperforming an active fund. It's all good news, right? So I also looked into the underlying holding this fund has, right? So this fund is a fund of fund, so it has to have an underlying fund, right? The underlying fund it holds is the JPM, like JP Morgan's Europe Dynamic, institutional share class, right? What you see here is a completely different picture. Since the inception of this fund, that is the underlying holding fund, which trades from 2003, I think. It trades from 2006, right? Since this fund's inception, it has massively outperformed the benchmark. But this fund, that is Edelweiss, only got launched in India around 2014 2014, right? So you can see that this fund has beaten its benchmark, a simple European stock market. But all the outperformance again goes away when I rebase it to 2014, like we already saw in the previous analysis, right? So if I just say from 2014 January, right? So over the last 12 years, it has mirrored or underperformed its benchmark, like you can see here. So overall, this is an active fund giving you exposure to the European stock market. It's charging a very high expense ratio of 1.52%, and it has underperformed its benchmark. The alternatives, there aren't much from Indian mutual fund access. Like from an Indian mutual fund angle, you don't have a lot of European mutual funds trading in India. But once you move beyond India, there are so many ETFs charging less than 0.1%, giving you exposure to the entire European market. That's it for this video. Thanks a lot for watching, and I will see you next time with another interesting fund. Thank you.